the show. I'm Eric Murphy. This is Skeptic Generation, and we need to talk. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. It is February 16th, 2025, episode 7, and we got a little bit of housekeeping. I am excited to see that we've already got a few calls on the line, which is fantastic. I want to dive into why you saw Dean Meadows on the intro. Scheduling issue. This was me this time. I have Dean scheduled for the last Sunday of the month, and it is the third Sunday of the month. So honestly, this gives me a good chance to switch gears and honestly let the audience know what the heck is going on. So as you've seen in prior episodes for this year, I have worked on really kind of siloing types of calls for different weeks of the month. So the first week of the month is more political, right? The second week of the month is more philosophical. So we have Tori on the first Sunday, Elliot on the second Sunday. And then one Sunday a month, I'm going to have a friend who is actually a pastor, a Christian apologist, on the show as my co-host once a month. I know. So here's the deal. I think it would be fun to have some disagreements with the power dynamic shared with someone who also has their finger on the hang up button, who can take calls from atheists while I take calls from Christians, who I'm going to need to learn to play nice with. Now, he and I are friends in real life, but that doesn't mean that we're necessarily going to play nice on this, but we're going to give it a shot. So I had everything all set up. I had it in the intro. Stay tuned. You're going to see that him come up in the intro next week when he's here. But yeah, I want to put that out there. And honestly, I think it's a good idea that we have a week in advance, just so that people who are watching can get an idea of what they'd like to call in about, because you're going to have a chance to talk to a Christian pastor, a Christian apologist, professional who will be here and taking calls as well. I think it's going to be interesting. But as for this week, I'm ready for you. I'm ready to take your calls. I'm normally going to be filling up extra weekends, right? That last weekend of the month with guests, and just today, it's us. Usually, it's going to be that, but hey, you know what? Honesty, clarity, that's what it is. So, with that said, let me put the phone number out there because I would love to get more calls as well. Let's have a productive day. Let's get those calls in. If you don't want to talk about what you believe and why, if you have a family member, give them a shout, tell them to call in. Today's the day. I've got the time, I've got the patience, I've got the extra bandwidth. I'm not trying to manage. Normally you see my eyes moving all across the screen during the show, and that's because I'm producing, in the background while I'm also hosting at the same time. And so that usually takes a lot more bandwidth, and with an extra person, that's just another level of complexity. So I'm ready to kind of focus in. Let me put the phone number up there before we move on to our first call. The phone number is 412-SKEPGEN. That's 412-753-7436. Or you can go to tiny.cc/SKEPGEN. That's tiny.cc/SKEPGEN. Our call screener is waiting to talk to you, and I would love to take your call. That said, let's move on to our first caller. Let's talk to Nick in Tennessee. Nick, you're live on the show.
Hello, top of the morning to you.
Hello, good morning, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for calling in. You called early, which is fantastic. I always have extra time to take those first callers, and I'm ready to talk to you. What's on your mind? What's going on?
Awesome. It's a pretty simple thing. I've often heard and often made the argument that a person cannot choose their beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
That belief is a function of being convinced of something, and you don't really choose what you're convinced by. It's the way you respond to that data that causes you to become convinced. But I was talking with an aunt of mine, and she disagreed and made a pretty good point that I would like to share and get your thoughts on. She said that it is possible to choose your beliefs by reinforcing a particular thought or idea over and over and over until it becomes essentially like ingrained into you and becomes a belief because you've been spent so much time and energy reinforcing it. The example she provided when we were having this talk was years ago they had a cat and it went missing,
mm-hmm.
and her kids, my cousins, were distraught. She sat down with them, had a conversation, and said, "Okay, one of two things happened: either the cat has run away and it's it's in danger, it's having problems, it's hurt, whatever,
Yeah.
or it's run away and it's doing fine. And we don't know which of those two it is, but we'll have faith, we'll believe, we'll whatever that the cat is doing well." And every time they thought of the cat, mentioned the cat, brought up the cat, they would act and say and repeat and whatnot that the cat was doing fine, and that wherever it was, of course they would say God was looking out for it, or whatever other platitudes, but essentially they would reinforce the belief that the cat was doing well, even though they had no evidence for or against that.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that people can become gaslit and can become convinced of ideas that are not true. And so my question is, is it possible for a person to essentially gaslight themselves into holding a belief that they were never rightfully convinced of, and they just kind of tricked their brain into holding that belief? And if so, does that give some credence to the common theist argument that, it's just a matter of do you choose to believe or not? And we always say no, it's not a choice. It's something that happens to you. But if a person can kind of gaslight themselves into holding that belief, then can we choose our beliefs?
That is a really, really good question. That does make me think about a couple of other things. Because there are people who are in terrible relationships, maybe they're in an abusive relationship and they go, "Oh, he's going to change eventually, I hope. I know that he's a better man than this, and this was just a one-time thing, and it's never going to be like that again."
Yeah. And they'll believe that despite evidence to the contrary.
But do they? While your aunt was doing that, was she still afraid? Was she still nervous that something might have happened to the cat, or was she that confident that that it was good? I can hope, right?
My family is
hope,
right,
is that is holding on to something and really, really wanting it to be true. And I imagine hope is something that people could really cling to. But here's where I think it could be valid. And mind you, I'm just some asshole on the internet, and so I want to get feedback, right? But what we don't talk about when it comes to that statement, right? You don't choose your beliefs, right? You're helpless to the way you understand the world. It's really an epistemic statement. Your beliefs, what you believe is true, is tied to your epistemology, the tool set that you use to understand the world around you. And so I imagine if you change your tool set, then you could potentially change your beliefs. If you I've talked about rationality before, right? Something is rational if it is internally consistent. Not necessarily if it's true or if it's, a good thing at all, but if it's internally consistent, right? A person who believes in ghosts can make a statement about ghosts and it be rational because in their worldview, there's a place for ghosts.
Right.
A religious person can have a rational statement about God and it be rational because it's entirely dependent on their internal consistency. And so in the same way, right, what you believe to be true totally depends on, how you break that down. And I think that I've talked to people who got really into. Do you remember The Secret?
No, I'm not familiar with that.
No, it was a self-help book that was just cringy as hell. It was from 15 years ago. And it was this idea that this power of positive thinking, that if you want something to be true enough, if you try hard, if you hope hard enough, that you can will that into the universe.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was like seized on.
Manifestation.
Yeah, manifesting. Exactly, that's it.
Okay.
And like a whole bunch of self-help gurus kind of latched onto it, and oh well, if you just imagine yourself being rich, then the wealth will come to you, that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
I was pagan about that time, and there was a lot of that in our circle.
yeah, I think that if you really like believed that, if you really kind of made room for that in your understanding of the world, then if like I think you could shift that, but ultimately, we talk about like mental gymnastics. This feels like a very, very like cut and dry example of mental gymnastics. Really needing to
Hmm.
kind of stretch and shift yourself so that the world can still make sense the way you want it to. But
Yeah.
ultimately, right, like the well being of the cat in your aunt's story didn't matter how much they believed a thing, right? If the cat was alive, the cat was alive, and the cat was dead. If the cat was dead, it didn't matter how much they tried to believe, they couldn't will it back to life if it was, you know what I mean?
Right. And I guess to be clear, they exhausted all of the like reasonable mundane means of trying to find the cat and make sure that it was okay, and still came up with nothing. They didn't see it on the road run over. They didn't see it at like the local animal shelter or anything. So they're just like, okay, the cat is gone. We have no idea what happened to it, and kind of to keep her kids from being just like pointlessly worried, she reinforced the, we'll just have faith and the cat's fine, and they just kind of like reinforced
Mm-hmm.
that mindset until, at least for her, she said it became ingrained, and she truly believes that the cat, or she said she truly believes that the cat was fine.
Did the
I
cat
don't
ever
know
come
how effective
back?
that was for my cousin. Second?
Did the cat never come back?
No, it did not.
That is kind of wild. Um, like, I can understand someone saying that they hope the cat was okay, but
Hmm.
to truly believe that it's like, I don't buy that. Yeah, I really don't. I would love for your aunt to call in, but like, I'm so curious. If you tell
Right.
yourself something enough, can you get there? I really don't think you can. Um,
So, but like if somebody else were to tell a person a thing, they can convince that person to believe the thing is true. Like there's plenty of examples of that with like cults and religious leaders and politicians and anybody with any kind of like social power. You often ends up like convincing other people to believe things that aren't necessarily true. So we know that that can happen. I was just wondering if like can a person do that to themselves?
so the way that I understand those dynamics is kind of in their reasoning. If the leader tells me it's true, then it's true, right? If my parents tell me a thing is true, then it's true. So that kind of epistemic grounding is based in trusting the person who's telling you the facts. I feel like you
Mm-hmm.
would need to be profoundly narcissistic to think that just because you said it, it is true to yourself. But like, it would make sense for a kid to do that for a parent. And it definitely checks out that a cult follower would believe that of their cult leader. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay.
Like if your aunt instead were to talk to a vet and that vet were to say, oh yeah, cats get lost all the time. Most of the time they just get brought in by another family who didn't see a collar or something, and that cat has a new home. If your cat was social, they've probably had this opportunity to, learn how to be social with other humans, and so they probably cuddled up to somebody who took them right in. If that was the case, then you'd have this kind of confidence that somebody has had experience and kind of knows what they're talking about, and then you could put that confidence on the vet who told you that. I don't I don't know if that's true, but just as a hypothetical, right?
Mm.
Then I can imagine that,
Okay.
and I think that would make sense, and I think that if you kind of formed your belief around that confidence, that that was a true statement, then you could get there. But I don't think you could. I don't think you could gaslight yourself that way. And maybe I'm just projecting, because for me, I've tried so hard. I didn't want to become an atheist. This was not where I wanted to
Right.
be.
Same.
Right? Like, this came at the back end of a whole lot of hardship. And a lot of that hardship was me going, where is God? Why can't I connect with God? Is there something wrong with me? Is there something wrong with my understanding of God? There was an entire search, and I thought for a long time that there was nothing wrong with a God. I just must personally be broken, right? Like, I desperately wanted to hold on to my beliefs.
Right.
And after a certain point, for me, it rang hollow. No matter how many times I prayed, no matter how many times I tried and to just do the thing, there was this deep sadness attached to it. Because, you could say it, but somewhere deep down, and I have to imagine that, I'm projecting, but I imagine that if I were your aunt, that even if I were to say, I'm just going to keep saying it's true, that's probably coupled with a lot of despair, And I feel like that despair...
Probably.
Yeah. And I feel like that despair is kind of
I think
indicative of the truth,
Yeah. And I would be inclined to think the same thing. I guess what gives me pause in that regard is that a lot of people believe in God, but also have like doubts and things that they don't understand, and they're kind of like unsure about pertaining to God. And so I think the same can be extended to other beliefs as well. It's like I can hold belief that the cat is fine, even though there's a part of my mind that is nagging me thinking the cat may not be fine. Like what if the cat just like ran an obscenely far distance away and like, went way farther than we expected, and it's miserable and all this. But of course there's possibilities, but having a doubt about a belief doesn't mean you don't have that belief. Right?
So, yes and no. I think that there's a tipping point. And again, and everyone who's watching is absolutely free to disagree. And I'm totally cool with that. This is just my opinion. Personally,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like when it gets to that point, I talk about degrees of confidence.
Right.
And so, you have this truth statement and you have your degrees of confidence about whether or not it's true. And after a certain point of confidence, you can go, okay, I'm going to accept this as true. And I think it's rational to be tentative about that. But yeah, I think having doubt about a truth statement makes sense, but you're still either convinced that it's true or not, like, how do I describe this? At a certain point, you're going to need to make a decision, if you can be kind of iffy on it, is it still raining outside? But I think ultimately what you think is true is going to determine whether or not you're grabbing your jacket on the way out the door, or your umbrella. I think that, yeah, we make tentative truth claims, but that's a really good point. There is a middle ground there, isn't there?
Okay. All right.
I'm not sure.
It seems like a very like nuanced theoretical question.
No, you don't just get to you don't just get to like ask me, what is your opinion? What's your take? What's going on?
I don't know. Like I was pretty convinced that people don't choose their beliefs until she said that, and then I started thinking about it. I was like, well, I know that people can be convinced of bad things.
Mm-hmm.
People can choose to be like willfully ignorant of things, but by like if they're avoiding information that contradicts their beliefs, and if they are reinforcing a belief even without basis, I don't think the human mind is impervious to the capacity to fool itself. I don't see why a person wouldn't be able to convince themselves of something to play the same trick on their own mind that they could play on somebody else's.
Yeah. You know what?
But
Maybe we can draw the line there. What if we say that you can't choose your beliefs, but you can choose the influences that you like bring into your life, right? You can choose the sources that you use to get information from. And so maybe you can't choose the belief directly, but you can reinforce, certain lines of thinking by surrounding yourself with certain people and certain ideas, putting yourself in little bubbles,
yeah, I think that goes back to the toolbox you were talking about earlier. That like the tools a person has in their mental like philosophy toolbox equip them or poorly equip them to figure out true things and base their beliefs on real facts and good reasons. So somebody who is poorly equipped might have bad reasons and bad facts, while somebody that's better equipped has better reasons, better facts. But they're both just doing what comes naturally with the information that they are, I guess, choosing to allow themselves to have. And I'm certainly not saying that like reinforcing a belief on yourself to this extent is in any way good. That's definitely not what I'm saying. I'm just wondering, like, if it's possible, like, is there some merit to the argument we choose our beliefs?
Yeah, I think even if you have a really good tool set, right, you can absolutely. So I know people who are just really, really smart, just like whip smart, have actually have been professors in mathematics and hard sciences. And in their later years, they wound up putting themselves into hardcore right-wing echo chambers. And so even though they have a really good toolbox, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're hold on just a second.
In other words,
it doesn't mean that their facts are better. It might mean that the tools that they're using are better, but they can still surround themselves with really bad facts. So I don't want to associate like having a good epistemology with necessarily having access to good facts.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. So if we can draw that line, then I think we're in agreement. Before we continue any further, I do want to put the phone number out there because I have open lines and I'd love to talk to other people as well. The phone number is 412-SKEPGEN. That's 412-753-7436. Or you can go to tiny.cc/SKEPGEN. That's tiny.cc/SKEPGEN. Our call screener is waiting to talk to you, and I would love to continue the conversation. Nick, this has been good food for thought.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a good chat.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Take care of yourself, man.
I'll let you get another caller. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye. That is interesting. And while I wait for another call to come in, I kind of want to think about that. It definitely feels every time we add nuance that things get a little more complicated. And so it feels good to be able to drop this "you don't choose your beliefs" statement out there to, feels like a way to, feels like a gotcha, feels like the truth bomb that you drop in those arguments. But are you taking into account what they are surrounding themselves with? So I think if I were to surround myself with really wooey people who believed in, this kind of pseudo spirituality and ghosts and chakras and stuff, eventually I imagine I would become more open to it. But I don't think that I would have necessarily chosen to change the belief as much as I would have chosen to change where I'm getting things in my life. And eventually, over time, yeah, those things can shift. So if that's the case, can someone choose their beliefs? I think that's kind of up to you. Is it choosing to change your belief if you very carefully curate where you're getting information? And that curation is in a very, very guided way, right? I know that I know that trying to evaluate things like evolution, as an evolution denier, right? You'll hear about it and then you'll look up information, but then the next thing you Google search is evolution from a believer standpoint. What do other believers have to say about this? What do Christian biologists say? What do Christian historians say, and archaeologists, and how can they explain those things? Because you're trying to find answers that fit with your pre-existing beliefs. And that definitely is something that we as humans just do. And so at that point, though, even then, are you choosing your beliefs, or are you trying to protect the ones that you already have? I think that on this show, I've really kind of dove into thinking out loud. And that's bitten me in the butt a few times. And I'm doing that right now. And I hope that y'all are patient and are generous with me. While I'm waiting, let me put the phone number one more time, and then I'm going to talk a little bit. But the phone number for callers is 412-SKEPGEN. That's 412-753-7436. Or you can go to tiny.cc/SKEPGEN. Tiny.cc/SKEPGEN. That's tiny.cc/SKEPGEN. One more time. 1 second. There we go. Oh, it's refusing to play. There we go. 412-SKEPGEN, tiny.cc/SKEPGEN. Our call screener is waiting to take your call, and I'm ready to talk to you. That's the nature of a call-in show. Sometimes the phone is ringing off the hook. Sometimes it takes a little bit to get callers in. But if you have been wanting to call in about an epistemic thing, if you wanted to talk about, really, I'm open. I never know what's coming in next. So if that call is coming from you, I'm ready for it. All right. So I feel like I've been called out enough. And since I have the time and the ability, let's get into something here. A few weeks ago, I got into talking about voting. And it really rattled a lot of people. And I took a stand saying that the threat of not voting can be really, really beneficial in pushing elected representatives to listen to their base. And I think the threat is important, and I think it's useful. And I think that voting is important too. I do. I want to clarify. And that does not give us an excuse to stop. That does not give us a reason to think that the work is done. And that does not give elected officials the confidence. It should not give elected officials the confidence to not listen to their base. They need to be afraid of the threat. And that I still stand behind. I think that it's been called a lot of things, political blackpilling. I've been accused a lot of that stuff, of creating an environment for Trump to win. I voted. I voted in this election. I voted in the last one, and I voted in every one that I have had the opportunity to as an adult. So I want to clarify that I have, and also this is where we are. So obviously that's not enough. And I should be okay making those threats. I think I should be okay threatening to not support a party that is not representing me. And I think it should be okay for us to say that. And if that's something that people are really upset about, I'm sorry. Voting is important, yes. And I think you should. And I also think that elected representatives need to be held accountable, and they need to be responsible for listening to their base. We'll see. We'll see if that costs me viewers or costs me patrons or something like that. But I think I left enough ambiguity on that episode that it really caused some issues. I had friends, I had volunteers, I had patrons reach out and need to get some clarification. And yeah, I think ultimately I'm angry. I'm angry, I'm bitter, I'm disappointed, I'm frustrated. And I imagine I'm not the only one. So, again, I'm just some asshole on the internet. And, you know, please take things in that context. All right. So I do have a few callers. Good. And so while our call screener screens them, let me tell you that the show is supported by you. It's hanging in there. We're doing our best. But if you want to support the show, consider going to patreon.com/skepticgeneration. That's patreon.com/skepticgeneration. That is the most consistent, most useful way to help. If, like me, you're in a tough situation and, you can't, support in that way, totally understood. If that's the case, like and subscribe. Take this moment to do that because that really, really helps. And it's definitely needed. On top of that, I also read the super chats at the end of every episode. So if you want to say something, I will read it. Just put that in the super chat during the live show and I will read it at the end of every episode. Still do that every episode. I want to make sure that people know that. That said, let's hop into our second call. Herbert in Pennsylvania. You're live on the show.
Hey, Eric.
Hey.
How are you today?
Man, I had no idea. I thought I was going to have somebody else on, then a scheduling issue, and I am so all over the place, brother. How about you?
I'm processing the emotions that I have since the last time we talked. Where I called up to talk about institutions and the importance of institutions, and you blindsided me with bringing up voting, and took a left-wing position that was basically laundering right-wing, which is that we need to threaten not to vote in the general to change. So what you said there, and I'll let you respond before I start my before I start.
Yeah. So I definitely think that if I were to kind of go back and look at this last election, Harris ran because Biden stepped down. And I think that happened because...
So Eric,
yeah.
Eric, you've said many times that you don't know much about politics.
Right.
So I'm not interested in you trying to explain politics to me when you don't understand it. Let's talk about the Tea Party. You said that left wing should imitate the Tea Party to take over the Democratic Party. Well, let me tell you what the Tea Party does. First, it's active and involved during primaries and puts up primary opponents. Second of all, the Tea Party always votes in the general election, every single time. No matter who wins, they always vote. That's what the base does. And because they do that, people take it seriously. If those who supported the Palestinians would have come out and would have said, we're going to vote no matter what, but we believe that Netanyahu's committing war crimes, we believe that Biden should take a stronger stand to the degree that he can, even though he couldn't cut off supplies to Israel, and we can discuss that. But if you would have said we're going to vote no matter what, they would have taken you seriously. But you didn't say that. You said being part of the left-wing youth, you were like group to vote, demographic to vote.
Herbert.
And because of that, you're going to be the least taken seriously.
Herbert. There was a bit of a drop, and I want to make sure that I hear what you said. Could you say that last part again? Because it sounds like the call dropped a little bit, and I feel like I missed something really important there.
Because because there is no guarantee that you're going to vote in the general, you are taken less seriously. And if you cared about the Palestinians, I've been arguing about Palestinian rights, two-state solution, one-state solution for over 15 years. And I've been doing it in liberal circles.
Mm-hmm.
I've been doing it with, I'm not Jewish, my background's Christian, but I consider myself an agnostic as far as my ethnicity. I'm
Sure.
Polish American. But I've been arguing with my liberal Jewish friends, conservative Jewish friends, and explaining how denying Palestinians their rights is wrong,
Mm-hmm.
and it puts Israel at risk.
Right.
And if you cared about Palestinians, you would have voted, and you would have voted against Trump.
So
Because
what did Harris
because
have to
Trump-
say about Palestine?
This go with what Trump had to say. Trump
No.
said he's going to throw out all pro-Palestinian supporters that are non-Americans. He said he's going to do ethnic cleansing. He said this in the campaign.
Mm-hmm.
He said they're going to clear out Gaza, ethnic cleansing, which is a genocidal act. He said all these things. Harris was not perfect.
No, I'm not.
Harris would have done more.
What did
Trump
Harris?
was worse.
What did
Trump
Harris?
was-
I understand what Trump said. What did Harris
would have
say?
voted for Harris.
What did Harris say?
Harris said that she supports a two-state solution. She supports Palestinians. She's concerned about what Netanyahu's doing. She said all those things multiple times over and over and over again.
The best
Trump
thing
said
that she
he's
did.
gonna throw out, Trump said he's going to throw out. Trump said that those that are marching, not those that are saying pro-Hamas, because Hamas is another right-wing lunatic organization, but those that were just for the Gazans, for the Palestinians, and for the people. Trump said that he's going to throw them out if they're not U.S. citizens. Trump said he's going to punish those that are marching for pro-Palestinian rights.
Right.
Trump said this in his campaign. Trump announced that he wants Gaza cleared out.
Mm-hmm.
Jared, his son-in-law Jared, said that they want to clean out Gaza and they want to turn it into a resort. We've known this for 2 years.
Yeah.
If you cared about the Palestinians, you would have voted for Harris, not because she was perfect, but because Trump is a right-wing fascist.
Okay. So there
because
are a couple of pieces there. Herbert,
Netanyahu-
I need to be able to answer you too.
times.
I need to answer you. You're right. You're saying a lot of things, and that's great, but I should be able to answer you at some point. Are you going to allow that?
I'm saying things you should already know.
Are you going to allow that?
Are you going to keep asking me? I'm obviously allowing it.
I'm honestly waiting. I didn't know if you were going to cut me off again, so I wanted to make sure I got from you that you were going to stop and let me respond. So, Herbert, I did vote. I voted. I talked about threatening not to vote. This is true. And also I've thought a lot about it, right? Me talking about this right now, bringing this up is because I've thought a lot about this. And you know what? You're right. In a lot of ways, you're right. And you're not right about everything, but in a lot of important ways, you are. People should vote. And also, you're right. The Tea Party does vote in every election, and they don't always necessarily vote for who the mainstream Republican Party put forward. They worked really, really hard to poll for their own candidates. And that's how they pushed their way into the party, because people who were running were actually getting
Be clear right there.
competition.
Just to be clear right there, the Tea Party always votes for their own candidate in the primary. They always vote for the party's candidate in the general.
Okay.
Always.
Okay. Then you know what? That's a good point. Okay. Then let's do that. That said,
my anger towards you, and my obvious.
Herbert, I'm not getting that you're angry at me.
I don't think I'm right with everything here, but my anger in general towards this whole thing is about talking to those on the left who I agree with on policy positions and are less and know that they're less informed on politics than me.
Herbert, so two things.
Don't listen to me when I try to explain to them. And you're doing that right now. I accept that.
No. Hold on. Two things. Number one, this right here is you being passionate. not angry at me. And people who mistake that aren't listening.
I appreciate that.
If you've listened to me at all for any of the years that I've done this, it's because when I get upset or whatever, passionate, it's about the topic. The least I can do is do that with you. I get that you care a lot. And I am trying to be more accountable by bringing in somebody on the first Sunday of every month who's very, very well educated politically, who can really handle those topics in a way that's better than me. I opened the show up and brought in a new recurring co-host just so that I can make sure that I don't fuck that up again. And number 3, I said 2 things. That's not fair. I said 2 things. A third thing on top, now that I've got those out, is I'm grieving. And I think you are too. And the upset about current people, who is currently in office is justified. And also, I think we needed to do better than Harris. I think Harris needed to do better by us too. And that doesn't justify Trump being in office. And I'm not saying that it's one thing or another, but both of those things can be true. Do you agree? Harris should not have just tried to walk a middle line and not say a lot about Palestine and Israel. She wasn't as fucking evil as Trump was, but she very much.
She wasn't evil at all. She wasn't evil at all.
No.
And
I said Trump was.
The saying that hindsight is 20/20 is a lie. There's no such thing. There's no such thing. We do not know what would have happened had she done the other. We do not know what would have happened. I know what I would have liked her to say.
Mm-hmm.
I know what I would have liked her to do. Biden could not cut off. Biden had to support Israel. He could not cut them off. Had he tried to cut them off, they would have brought the law. They would have taken it to court.
Then let him take it to court.
He'd have been overridden because there's 20% of Democrats that are hardliners in Israel. So he would have been vetoed.
Cool, but at least do the thing. Right, like
he was doing the thing in the face of fascism. I don't know if you watch what was going on over in Europe right now, but J.D. Vance is trying to get. I mean, Trump wants us to go to war against our NATO allies.
I know, by large, in part by instituting tariffs, massive tariffs on our closest allies. And then also not just being a fucking turd and a lot, yeah.
J.D. Vance went over there and criticized our European allies for bullshit.
So,
and then he refused to meet with the German delegation in Munich and went and met with AfD, which is a pro neo. I don't want to get you demonetized, but
if you don't think that this is getting demonetized already, you are out of your mind. What's going on?
Okay, so a neo-Nazi, the AfD, they're neo-Nazis.
Yeah.
And we're looking here. I mean, Trump pulling us out of U.S. aid, not only are people going to starve to death, but the U.S. is going to lose. That creates a power vacuum for China. We're looking here at a possibility that there's only going to be 3 countries in the next decade. There's only going to be 3 viable countries. It's going to be China, Russia, and the U.S., and they're all going to be fascist. And that's scary.
Herbert?
That's very scary.
I can tell you, number one, I feel like you're going to get a much more nuanced response on the first Sunday of the month. Just saying. But if you're just talking to me, I think historically when people have been faced with this, they did stuff. And it wouldn't be surprising if that happened again, because I think historically we've seen that if, people are run under the boot of fascism, that they fight back.
It took 1,100 years to get from the fall of the Mediterranean relatively well-off nations into the know-nothingness of the Dark Ages. It took hundreds of years. And while I understand revolution, and I'm not a revolutionary, I'm a pragmatist, and I'm an institutionalist. But while I understand revolution is possible, sometimes that possibility is you're talking about hundreds of generations off.
Yeah, I think that we're not in either of those situations. I don't think that there are only three viable state solutions. There are enough other countries. There are enough other countries. I see the encroachment of fascism, and I see, and I just also want to be clear, right? This isn't Rome. The United States is far, far from it. How long did it take for people to step up to fascism in the early 1900s? Right. I think from the Kaiser, right? If you were to go back, I think you're looking at 40 years? 30, 40 years of a pretty big spike, and then in the last 20, like a really big ramp into fascism.
I'm just going to stick with your good vibes right now. I have responses that counter it, but I'm just going to stick with your good vibes. I mean, it's, I want people to be positive because we need to be positive, but I want people to be realistic because we need to think realistic, and we need to put down, as you and I have done today, put down our small differences to think to be as a better united. I mean, you and I are going to have disagreements, but we're trying to be united, and we're trying to be considerate of one another.
Yeah, ultimately, you and I, our disagreements are the kind of disagreements you have over a beer with someone you care about. And I definitely think that these are the kinds of disagreements that you have with somebody who you know that ultimately, yeah, we should have each other's backs. I think that, and I hope that we do not give in to the despair that things are not going to get better in our lifetimes. Because we're here to do it. We need to. I need to live with that, Herbert.
See, the chat room's getting into some pretty crazy things here.
Oh?
Liberal colonialism.
Liberal colonialism?
Yeah. I mean, neoliberal colonialism basically means that capitalism came about, and then the far right wing took the left wing's opening of markets and used it against humanity. It's not neoliberal. It was far right wing. I know from studying anthropology in undergrad, we talked a great deal about how anthropologists were used early on for the understanding and the control of other cultures. And anthropology grew from a very dark place. It started from a science, much like biology.
Yeah, but I don't.
A lot of dark methodology.
I mean, this is true, and also I don't want to treat it the same way that lawyers treat fruit from a corrupted tree. Like there is.
But that's my point. Like there's bad things in every movement, in everything. You can't. If you're looking for perfection, you're never going to find it. And the Democratic Party is not perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And the same as the progressives, the same as the left wings, not perfect.
Would you agree?
We're all fighting for something.
Yeah, and would you agree that in a potential future where we did effectively push back a fascist regime, truly and effectively pushed it back, that the Democratic Party would look the same as it does today?
No, the Democratic Party should be like the left wing in Europe. That's what the Democratic Party should look like. You should unite, universal health care with some small private on top of it. We should have strong social safety nets. I mean, conservatism in the U.S.
Well,
has always been just so far right, and that has pulled the Democratic Party towards it. But yeah, Clinton was a moderate, and I thought he was a good president. But Clinton was a moderate.
yeah.
George W. Bush was committed war crimes.
Yeah.
And they penned up memos for war crimes, right? And I sat there and screamed about Abu Ghraib. If we allow Abu Ghraib to get by, then and it's so funny because none of this is funny, but
people being held indefinitely at Gitmo.
And indefinitely in Gitmo. And
Yeah.
Obama tried to overturn that, but the Senate wouldn't let him. Obama tried to bring them out, but there was no place to put them.
So I guess here's the question: is what happens when the government is unable to protect its people like that?
I'm not sure. Unable to protect its people, like
you
mean as far as providing strong social safety net?
Well,
and so forth?
not just strong social safety net, but the right to know why you're being held, and getting rid of indefinite, forever kind of get thrown in a hole and throw away the key kind of detention facilities, right? Like that is insane, and we've been living with that for 20 years.
Yeah. It is insane and it's
So,
wrong.
So what does a people do when their government is not protecting them from that kind of shit?
Vote for Hillary. Make sure vote for Hillary in 2016. Make sure that you overthrow the SCOTUS, which is we haven't had a liberal Supreme Court since the late 1950s.
I think,
and had we had a liberal Supreme Court, you would have seen us return back to, focusing on what is the fundamental values of not the plain text reading, which is BS, but a good interpretation of the times of our Constitution.
I'm not saying you're entirely wrong, and also, I think that we need to be active in other ways too, though. I think we need to cut off funding to corporations by striking. I think we need to organize people not to go into work by creating social systems where we can take care of people who are striking so that they can pay their bills, right? If we can start doing that, I think ultimately, right now we're seeing a corporate oligarchy. Elon Musk in the White House is enough of evidence of that. And if we're going to hit them where it hurts, then it needs to be in the pocketbook. People need to stop. Like right now, we're seeing a vast repeal in the the safety and rights of workers in the United States. I think workers need to do something about it.
Yeah, I agree as far as marching, as far as divestment, as far as I agree with all that stuff, but I think we need to go further. Because
I agree.
We've had a conservative movement which has been funded by millionaires and billionaires, nefarious ideas for a very long time, and we need to catch up. We need a think tank, a clandestine think tank that is putting together ideas. We need to be considerate of our language.
And
right?
in that way, Herbert,
yeah.
With that, we're hitting the limit of what is comfortable to say on YouTube. And so I am going to save you from yourself, Herbert. And you are going to take care of yourself. There are things we disagree on, and I feel like nitpicking things, I think you're viewing yourself as realistic, and I'm viewing you as pessimistic. And I think you hope that you're being pessimistic. So I think we can push back and forth on that.
Yeah, I don't think it's pessimistic to see I've had this discussion many times about what's pessimism versus optimism versus, rainbow colored glasses versus, it's not pessimistic to see bad things coming.
Yeah.
It's not optimistic to want to see good things coming. Realistic is to look at things as they are. And as things are right now, it's very scary. And if the U.S. voter, the third of voters that didn't turn out, don't wake up and start paying attention to what's going on, we're in trouble.
I don't think they need to worry about paying attention for very long. I think it's going to be hitting them right when they go to work, right when they go to school, right when they're, as soon as they start getting laid off because of medical issues or whatever the case is. I think it's going to become a lot more real for a lot more people now. So
I like how, yeah.
Herbert, take care of yourself, and I'll talk to you probably on a first Sunday when I've got somebody who can really push back on you. Okay?
Okay.
All right.
Take care, Eric.
You too. There's a lot there. And yes, I do read in the chat. Yes, there were some things that were said that were a lot. And ultimately, at what point are you going to focus on what's important? I think what's important is, solidarity. And we're not Rome. We're not Italy. We're not Germany. But we can see what people do. We can see what people have done. Let's move on to the next call. Connor, in Texas. You're live on the show.
Hey, Eric, how's it going?
It is a day, Connor.
Yeah, I heard that last call. Don't worry, I'm going to avoid politics for this one.
That's all right. That's all right. That's the beauty of a call-in show. You never know what's coming next. And
so I was wanting to jump in on that first caller and just maybe provide a couple of personal experiences to add to the conversation, just to chew on, about choosing your own beliefs.
Okay.
So I got a couple. The first one is more of a generic attitude. For the last 20 years at my parents' property, there's been over 200 cats that have been born and lived on that property and typically always go missing. So for a personal perspective, mine was always, if you don't have a body, you don't know what happened. And, I've always I have always used it to not worry about stuff, but I also do have a self-recognition that it's a bit of a denial kind of aspect I take in it.
I think I need a little bit more information.
Missing cats for 20 years, we just wait for the next ones to come around. But when they go missing, my whole aspect is, if you don't have a body, you don't know what happened. Yet at the same time, I recognize that it's a bit of a denial stance that I take.
Yeah. Jesus, Connor, that's dark.
Well, I mean, when you live out in the country and
well,
it's how you keep yourself from losing your mind when you're a kid.
But I have to imagine that,
after the first few litters, we stopped naming them.
That's brutal. Okay, so what part of your belief were you choosing there?
I think it's the choose. Well, no, I'm not trying to say we do or do not choose. I was wanting to bring in personal experiences related to the first caller, just for something to chew on and add to the conversation.
Yeah, that the first caller said that their aunt had a cat that went missing, and so they chose to believe
Yeah,
that
which
that
is
cat
why.
was doing well.
Yeah, that's why I brought up this first one.
Right. And they were saying that they believed it and they made the choice to believe it, that that cat was doing well, even though they never found out what happened to it. And so
Right.
where you're responding is
Is
you
to
had
not
letters of,
have a belief in what happened since I don't have evidence of what could have happened.
but even as a kid, you knew what could have happened.
Oh no, if I thought about it, I would probably come to the realization, but without even realizing it, for mental health reasons, it was like, hey, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what happened. No, nothing to worry about.
So that honestly sounds like a thought stopping technique. You know, we talk
What?
a thought stopping technique.
Okay.
So it happened a lot in the church, that there are things that you'd tell yourself so that you'd stop thinking about it. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Why do bad things happen to good people? Well, God has a plan.
Okay.
And we're just too tiny brained to understand it. And so we just need to trust God's plan. And that would be kind of the, okay. And then you stop thinking about it. Right. You know, I don't know what happened to the cats. They're kind of gone. I don't know. Okay. Just kind of stop thinking. I don't think you necessarily chose a belief as much as you employed a thought stopping technique to prevent yourself from kind of digging any further. You know what I mean? And I think that's a really interesting example of like a secular version of that, because I always bring that up in a religious context as thought-stopping techniques. And so I think people think that that's just a purely religious thing, but that is definitely a secular version of a thought-stopping technique.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's fair. And now there is a second one that is actually was in a religious one for me about when I first decided to join the Baha'i faith, but I was leaving, in a way, leaving Christianity. Mm-hmm. Now, the thing was that when it was, I still believed Jesus was the literal Son of God at the time, but it was a 4-month struggle within me to let that go and stop believing it and just believe Jesus was a messenger of God.
Yeah, there are definitely a number of faiths that have kind of taken that on. That, for me, would have been appealing when I was trying to find a way to keep God in my life, but I knew that the beliefs that I had weren't fitting. I think just where you and I separated is ultimately I didn't see a good reason to keep that either.
No, I understand. I was just bringing it up in the context of the conversation of choosing your beliefs.
Are you though? Because I after that call, I talked about protecting your beliefs, you know, and
I kind of joined in. I kind of started watching the show 20 minutes late, and I called in halfway through listening to that caller.
No worries. So what I was talking about was kind of drawing a line between choosing your beliefs and protecting beliefs that you don't want to challenge, right? And I think that a lot of people, right, the example that I used was that as a Christian, kind of looking up evolution and hearing about it and being like, no, that's not true, right? You read about it and you read things you don't want to read. And so the next thing you Google is Christian biologist. What do Christians have to say about it? You know, what do people in my faith, how do they rectify? How do they, you know, hold these positions at the same time? That way I can try and find a compatible view with what I already believed, because I wanted to protect what I believed and not challenge it too much, you know? And I think that for me, I would have leapt to well, maybe Jesus wasn't the Son of God, but maybe Jesus was a messenger, as a way to protect this idea that Jesus should still be held in this, you know, religious view, without getting rid of it entirely. You know what I mean?
I can see where you're coming from.
I'm not saying that's what you did. I'm saying that's how that would have worked for me.
I know you're not saying that. It's just like in this very specific context, it still sounds like a change, although I could just be misreading it.
Well, let me give you a little bit more there. God changed quite a bit for me over time, right? So, God eventually became very liberal because I became very liberal, right? I thought, well, God wouldn't just throw people out on their ear. I would find every verse that had Jesus being good and kind to the poor and the weak, as examples of how, well, Jesus was obviously very socially minded and cared very much about taking care of the poor and the needy. And so, yeah, my view of God warped and warped and warped and warped because I wanted to bring God with me through my journey, And so,
Yeah.
if Jesus needed to not be the Son of God but still be important because I didn't want to let that go, then yeah, that's how that would slip in that way for me.
Okay.
Does that make a little more sense?
Yeah, I see where you're coming from.
Yeah. Now here's the real problem, Connor. The real problem is I only have my own lens. And so while I try to seek to understand people and while I try to be like a good kind of honest interlocutor, I'm projecting those things on you. And that's not fair, which is why the best thing for me to do is ask questions. That way I can find out what you think and not just project. But that feels like it's starting to get out of the context of the reason that you called. But thank you. I appreciate appreciate your input.
All right, that's all I had.
All right, take care, brother.
You too.
Ooh, interestingly, we have our Canadian friend John calling in next. Let's roll right into talking to John. John in Canada, you're live on the show.
Hi, Eric. How are you?
John, can I be honest with you?
Yes, you may.
I feel like I need a hug.
What, is V not with you?
Oh, V's asleep. It's just been one heck of a morning. That's all.
Where's your former co-host, the one I spoke to last week, or last time I called?
Oh, Tori?
Yeah.
Tori's at home with her kids.
Oh, okay.
Everything's good. It's just been a hell of an episode. What do you want to talk about?
I just want to ask you, what do you think of the state of the world?
I don't like it, John. I feel like the reasons are too numerous to mention, but I think that in Canada, y'all tend to look at Americans as being very self-centered, and a lot of my response is going to sound very America-centric and very self-centered.
Oh, I don't mind. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that John, do you know what fascism is?
I know exactly what fascism is.
Okay. Let me make sure that I'm using the term correctly, because today feels like exactly the kind of day that I would put my foot in my mouth. I know that when Mussolini first talked about fascism, it was a mix of corporation and state. When the government is enforcing and supporting corporations, and ultimately fascism is used as a type of strong control over people through violent means to get their political ends. So I'm seeing fascism grow in multiple countries. I saw it happening in the Philippines with Duterte, in parts of Canada. I'm seeing it.
When you say parts of Canada, who exactly are you referring to?
I'm referring to number one, the pushback when I'm thinking about. Do you remember when all those news stories came out about the way that the government was treating natives in Canada?
No, I missed that. Please tell me.
No. Canada has a really, really, really bad history with the way that it's treated its native inhabitants. People just disappearing, like, it's brutal. And the pushback, it feels like there's been a lot of nationalistic, right, kind of, my country is the best country ever, don't you dare criticize it kind of stuff. Do you remember the big trucker protest
Yes,
that
I
happened?
remember.
Right.
I saw with my own eyes.
You did. What did you think about that?
Now, well, I did. I thought it was very disturbing seeing my fellow Canadians.
Why was it disturbing to you?
Well, I hate it when people disagree with each other.
Well, but they might have good reason.
They did.
So what was disturbing about their disagreement?
Yeah, well, they were disagreeing with the government, forcing them to, what's the word I'm looking for? I could be wrong about this, but I think they were upset that they had to wear masks or that their jobs were threatened because due to the shutdowns during the pandemic. I think. I'm not an expert.
No,
I really think it was about the lockdowns.
Yeah,
That's my best guess.
The lockdowns were a big part of it. There was a whole lot more to it, but let's focus in on the lockdown thing. There were a lot of people who thought that the global pandemic was a grand conspiracy, that there was no pandemic at all.
By who?
By the people in charge, the shadow government.
The shadow government?
Yeah.
Seriously?
Yeah. That's the whole QAnon thing. Absolutely. And that was a big part of what motivated those people. So, like, you have people who had been convinced that through conspiracy that the pandemic was not true, did not really happen, and that it was just an attempt at what? Curtailing people's rights, forcing them to wear masks, and generally being, forcing them to do things they don't want to do.
To what end?
Well, so at the time I was actually listening to a lot of right-wing media because I was doing YouTube videos that were covering stuff that was going on at the time. There were a lot of people who believed that it was Satan who was...
Satan?
Yeah. I'm serious. Yeah. No, there were a lot of people who believed that the vaccine was actually a microchip that was going to imprint the sign of the beast, which was a sign of the end times, that it was a satanic conspiracy to force people away from God and make the end of the world happen.
Well, I don't believe in Satan, but if Satan was going to destroy the world, I really don't think he would use a microchip. I think it was a more overt plan.
Maybe, but regardless, you had a whole lot of reasons that people clung to for why they thought, right? So there are people who, for religious reasons, thought that it was the devil that was pushing the end of the world. Other people just thought that it was a flu and everyone was just overhyping it for whatever reason. But you had a whole bunch of people who, during a global pandemic, decided that they were going to protest. I think that's one of the stupidest things people can do. Like, protest for it. Like, there are a lot, like, protest. I'm very much pro-protest. That said, weird conspiracies like that is a awful thing to protest for. So you're seeing that. You're seeing misinformation. I think the state of the world is in trouble when it comes to people not getting access to actual, real information. We are stratifying ourselves in these silos where you're only seeing content that agrees with you, and so people are unable to interact with the other side or deal with ideas that challenge their own. And on top of that, you have a rise in governments that are just scary, John. Did you see, this was years ago, there was a Christmas where the president of the Philippines put out a message on TV in the Philippines saying, if you're a criminal this Christmas, make sure you say goodbye to your family, because you will not be alive next Christmas.
Oh my God. You're serious?
I'm dead serious, John.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I think that on top of that, we're seeing the end result of, at least here in the United States, we have made it legal for government officials to be bribed by big businesses. It's legal here now.
Is illegal for big business to bribe politicians?
No, not anymore. It's not illegal anymore.
Oh, it's not illegal.
No.
So that means it's legal now.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I thought you were saying the opposite. Okay, all right.
No. The opposite would be good, right?
Yes,
No, yeah. No. There are ways that you can now fund, government things, and put money in the pockets of elected officials without putting your name on it.
That's corruption right there.
That is. And so you have people like Elon Musk standing behind the president in the White House now. You're seeing the end result of that. So what do I think of the state of the world, John? Not good. I think that this is what happens when we don't find a good line between capitalism and taking care of the needs of people. I think that we are finding out what happens when people get enough bad information, what they're willing to do with it. And we're seeing all of the money and all of power in the hands of a very few people who are willing to take the rest of what everybody else has, and it's scary. I'm nervous, and it's tough. That's what I think, John.
Okay. Well, I'm glad that you spoke to me. Well, have a good day. Have a good day, John, and say hello to V for me.
Will do. Hey, John.
Yeah.
Conversations with people like you, where you ask, and we argue, and sometimes we get heated about it, feel like a really great way to interact with these ideas so that we can get better. So keep calling, okay?
Thank you. I will do that. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
All right, let's shoot over to the next call. Chris in Scotland. Ooh, man, this opened things up. Chris,
Hi,
you're live.
Hiya.
Hi. How's it going? What did you want to talk about today?
Well, it's been a very political episode, and I just wanted to ask you, obviously everyone, I'm sorry, I should rephrase. A lot of people around the world are looking at this and thinking, good grief, what an absolute train wreck. And, most reasonable people at least are feeling quite sorry for the average American people and thinking this is dreadful, what's going on. But as someone who lives in America, what is your sort of experience of daily life? Do you feel like a lot has changed, or obviously ICE is, from what I've seen on the news, deporting quite a lot of people and just sort of going to people's doors and picking them up, essentially.
Sure. So,
yeah, do you feel like you've been noticing a lot of changes just, since the election?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know how different the U.S. government is from yours, but the state government, right, the local government has a lot of control. So there's the federal government, everything, and then there's the state government. And a couple of years ago, I was living in Texas. Texas is pretty notoriously very conservative.
Indeed.
Yeah. They've split up voting districts so that even if the majority of people want to vote for more progressive things, they've actually cut up the geographic areas for voters such that it's weighed specifically against them. It's a really, really shitty system. With that said, there were some really radical things going on in Texas. I was working for a publishing company at the time, and there was a Planned Parenthood up the street. Do you know what Planned Parenthood is?
I do indeed, yeah. It's sort of abortions and help with people who are pregnant and things like that.
Yeah, yeah. They do a lot of women's health services, and abortion is and can be one of them. It was right down the street. I had to drive by it every day to work. It got firebombed.
Jesus, really?
Mm-hmm. So I had to drive through a bombed out Planned Parenthood, drive past it every day to work in
Who
every
does
way.
that?
People where I lived. On top of that, there was local state legislation that was passed that considered care for trans children, right? Any like gender affirming care for children to be classified as child abuse. And so they directed the Department of Children's Services to take children from their homes. The state decided that they wanted to start abducting and kidnapping trans children from their homes in Texas.
That's horrible.
Now the Supreme Court wound up popping in and telling them they can't do that. But they also started passing laws, putting bounties out on anybody who helped somebody get an abortion. So if you helped somebody get an abortion, there was a toll-free line that you call in, you get a reward for snitching on other people. Even on suspicion, you could get arrested. That was also challenged in court.
Really?
Yeah, that was also challenged in court, but that didn't stop the police from arresting people for suspicion of helping someone get an abortion. Now, my partner's trans.
Yeah.
And I'm a public figure. Not a big public figure anymore, but I still am. And I came to the realization that anybody could make a call accusing Eric Murphy of helping someone get an abortion. And until that got resolved, I would be sitting in a jail cell. That's an easy thing to do living in Texas. That's worse than doxing. It is worse than swatting. It would potentially just put me in jail until it got fixed, right? And things came to a head when we were living just a little north of Austin at the time. There was a local library that had a big protest because they were protesting. There was a story time, drag story time thing that they were doing. And people protested and they were waving Nazi flags.
Jeez.
This was 15 minutes from where I lived, from my home.
That is disgusting.
This is the nearest public library where this is happening. So I needed to move. We needed to leave. And we had saved up for over a year.
Understand.
And we moved across the country. I now live in Oregon.
Nice.
Where it's not so bad. And what a wonderful privilege it was for me to have that. What an incredible privilege that I know most people don't have the luxury of being able to do. And so now I'm not in a place where I am as nervous as I used to be. That said, shit's still happening, you know? It's just further away from where I'm at right now.
I see. And do you feel like, just in the last few weeks, even since Trump got in, do you feel like you've kind of noticed a lot of changes, just on the street?
If I went out, I probably would see changes, but I don't go out very much. Mostly I'm just trying to get, help people with podcasts and do YouTube videos and pick up contracts wherever I can to do like videos for other YouTube channels. But yeah, I'm not out very much right now. So I couldn't tell you. I know people are feeling more desperate though. More and more stories of people who are getting terminated from their jobs for any reason, and some of them blatantly illegal, but the federal government right now has been pulling the teeth out of the government programs that would protect workers. So they're finding that they have no recourse for what's going on. So it's feeling pretty bleak, Chris.
I'm sorry to hear that. I've been I've been seeing a lot of it on the news, and most people are sort of against what Trump is doing, and and indeed what Elon Musk is doing. Don't get me wrong, you have idiots in my country as well. I've had quite a few battles with neo-Nazis and people following a guy called Tommy Robinson, but yeah, it's ultimately you just have to have faith that the majority of people will take their cue from science, will be reasonable, will be decent, I suppose. But I'm sorry this is happening in your country.
It's okay. I think that this is a time for solidarity. It's a time for us to reach out to each other and build stronger networks of communities. That the religious conversations are important, yes. And also we need to find our allies, and we need to work hard. We need to protest, and we need to push back however we can in ways that are going to, it feels like I look back at history and I see a lot of people who've fought for their well-being, and I think I'm living in a generation where that's the case.
Mm-hmm.
And that's honestly giving me hope.
I'm glad that is giving you hope, and I hopefully people will come together and will eventually see what kind of person Donald Trump really is. And I think that I think in some ways the sort of anti-scientific ideology does play into some of this stuff, because a lot of the people who are pro-Trump, they're right-wing Christians and they're conspiracy theorists and stuff like that. But ultimately, I think people will see him for what he is, and even Trump voters have expressed regret so far.
I think that we need to also focus on a world without Trump. That Trump is not the be-all, end-all. And if Trump stopped being president tomorrow, fascism wouldn't go away. No. And if that's the case, then we've got more work to do, And, I don't think it, yes, of course Trump matters, but also I think we need to set our goals on what we want, right? Trump put in several Supreme Court justices who were able to repeal a woman's right to get an abortion nationally, right?
Yeah.
Trump did that, but I'm not phrasing that around Trump. I'm phrasing that around how are we going to support reinstating a woman's right to choose.
Yeah, so it's more the sort of
what's the practical...
It's the infrastructure that allows this sort of thing to happen.
Yep. And, setting those goals to, it's not just about Trump in office. It's about the Supreme Court. It's about, those systems in place. You got it. Yeah. So we're going to focus on it. We're going to talk about it. And I do hope that you're right. I do hope that being able to talk about unscientific thinking, or even, I think a lot of people forget that trying to use scientific reasoning when it's not the right place is just as bad. We need to talk about that too. Well,
people's reason for believing might not be based around science. I totally get what you mean.
No. What I mean is, I'll give you an example. So I want to say mid 1800s, there was this big scientific push. People were all talking about evolution by natural selection, and kind of how that impacted the way they viewed the world. And it became very popular to look at evolution and go, oh, that's a model that works. We should replicate that. And they turned an is statement, right? That this is how speciation happens through natural selection. And they turned it into an ought statement. We ought to do that.
I see.
And because people were trying to be scientifically minded, what they did is they created eugenics.
No, I totally get what you mean.
So we also need to have in mind context that being scientifically minded can also be a reason for people to justify atrocity. It's really up to us to understand, evolution is an is statement, but never an ought statement, right? Survival of the fittest is a phrase that people use to justify terrible, terrible things. Survival of the fittest is an is statement, not an ought statement. And so, yeah.
Indeed. Indeed, you're quite right. And I think that's something that I just hadn't considered that much.
Yeah, I think that that's a problem in the skeptic space. Is a lot of people think, oh well, if I try to be as scientifically minded as possible, that things are going to be great. But the fact is that we have our own pitfalls as well, and so we need to keep that context in mind. And just have our eyes on the prize, right? The goal is to live in a world where people have rights, people have freedoms, and people feel safe and are secure in their well-being. And I think that our goals need to be directed that way.
That's a fair point. But yeah, listen, I always enjoy chatting to you. But listen, I hope you have a good night, and just thank you for taking the time to talk to me, and just for being there as somebody in the skeptic space who's really focusing on hope and unity and things like that. I think it's important.
Sometimes I think I'm doing the opposite, but I really, really hope I am doing that. Chris, thank you for calling. Thank you for supporting, and I appreciate you.
You're very welcome, pal. Have a good night.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
I saw in the comments, some people went, oh, it's Chris. Chris is my favorite. I'm glad. All right, let's get into an actual topic that's more focused. Brendan in South Carolina wants to talk about being a good ally for a trans family member. Brendan, you're live on the show.
Hi, Eric.
Hello.
I've called a few times before. I used to be pagan, and you kind of helped. You and V both kind of helped me walk out of those beliefs. I don't know if you remember any of those conversations.
Oh, that's very cool. I've had quite a few of them, so I don't remember the specifics, but I'm really, really glad.
That's okay. I mean, I listen to the show intermittently, and occasionally I feel like it like literally today, I just happened to open my phone and the live stream came up on YouTube, and this is something I've been kind of dealing with for the last couple of weeks. And I thought, I've spoken to Eric before, and he seems to have some pretty good opinions, and so I thought I'd just kind of see if I could get on and ask.
Yeah, what's up?
So I have a trans sister. She's 21, and she's currently living in my attic with her boyfriend, who is also trans.
Okay.
And they were, so this house was our grandmother's house. She had to move out because it was too big for her. And my wife and I, who were, have been pretty financially stable and stuff, were asked to basically take over the house and take care of it. And so we moved in last summer. And before we had even moved in, it was supposed to be that my sister and her boyfriend were looking for a place to live and trying to move out. And since my sister has come out, she has not been able to keep or hold a job pretty much at all.
Oh, that's brutal.
Of course, we live in South Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
and so it's not exactly the best place for her to be. But basically, at this point, the situation is getting more complex because now her boyfriend is pregnant.
Mhm.
And so it's, at a point where the house is already kind of full, and we have been trying to help them, like figure out a job situation, figure out some kind of income they're not really bringing in, like much. And it's difficult. I feel like a lot of it is very comes close to a topic about, like the way that they present, and the fact that they are trans, and I'm just constantly afraid of saying the wrong thing, and being insensitive. And I've reached a point where I kind of don't know how to have the conversation about it anymore. I don't know if you have any insights into a situation like that. I know that, obviously your partner is trans and things like that, but I don't know if you have any advice.
Well, so I want to maybe help shift the way that we're looking at this, right?
Okay.
Because trans folks are just as numerous and different as every other group. So like, right, I'm half Mexican, and I think that if I was in an area that really was not cool with Mexicans, then if someone were to call in, and my partner was doing a show and somebody called in and said, how do I help my Mexican sibling? The you can kind of see how that's an interesting framing. You know what I mean?
Right.
And what I find is that performative liberals talk about, allyship with trans folks, and people who are actually allies with trans folks are just there to help their friends. The transness doesn't come into it as much as it does, like you're dealing with a relationship with your sibling,
Right.
and this relationship with your sibling is one that has a lot of detail and nuance that I don't know. And because of that,
Right.
I think that, but phrasing this, kind of shifting this back to, this is a relationship with your family, and also, this situation that they're in. Honestly, I recommend seeing a therapist about it. Because I feel like you're running the risk of becoming resentful. And what a therapist can do is they can help you kind of go through where you can protect that relationship and also be a good big brother.
Okay.
Because like, ultimately at the end of it, I'm assuming that your goals are going to be to help your sibling and also have a great relationship with them. And also they're in a tough spot, and things seem to be getting more and more complex. And so, looking out for your well-being and the well-being of that relationship, I think can be best facilitated by talking to a therapist. That way they can help you kind of write out and maybe work on what your goals are, so you can really come up with a detailed plan on how to approach it. But yeah, the transness of it, that's a weird phrase. Like the Mexicanness of it. This is a sibling thing,
Right. It's just, I guess the reason why I think about it, because I wasn't initially thinking about it being a, like relating to, like any, the fact that they are trans, but like, we'd have conversations every now and again where her boyfriend would be applying to, work at like Chick-fil-A. And I was like, do you know like what Chick-fil-A is like as a company? Like if you're trying to get as many jobs as, like if you're trying to get a job, like I feel like Chick-fil-A is probably not going to treat you very well. You know what I mean? Like if you do get the job, you're going to have a hard time there.
Maybe, but also I imagine corporate might be a little extra cautious. I think that when you're in a tough situation like that, sometimes beggars can't be choosers too. If they're just trying to find something,
Right.
That.
And I guess it's I mean, for lots of reasons, you know what I mean? I'm concerned about their well-being, you know what I mean? Especially with the fact that they've got a kid, you know what I mean, like coming now and all the things that are going on relating to that. And it's just,
I hear you.
stressful,
Yeah, I think that sounds like you're in a tough spot, and I wish I had more for you. But really, like in my experience, getting some professional help so that like you have so many details going on in your life that I'm not privy to, that
right.
I would definitely do more harm than good to try to give advice on that. But yeah, nothing that I can think of saying sounds any better than a platitude right now, Brendan.
That's understandable.
And I don't want to just lean on platitudes. But that doesn't feel as much like I said, when you're looking at allyship, when it's boots on the ground, it doesn't look like allyship. It looks like being a good friend, being a good brother, being a good family member,
right.
Whatever the case is. And keeping your eyes on being a good brother. And I think that would be a good way, at least, to frame that. You got this.
Thank you. I know you're feeling, you know what I mean, like you didn't have much as far as advice goes, but it's useful to hear the context of just kind of taking the transness back out of it. You know what I mean? Because that's kind of been I don't want to, say like a slippery slope, but that's kind of like a, just a trail that we've been on, feeling like it's getting more and more involved with that. But it's helpful to think back out of it.
Yeah, I think, if we were to remove that, the situation would still stand. You have a sibling that's
that I have,
living with you and having this.
Now expecting a child, and things are, complex, and they're living in an attic, and that's not a good place to have a kid.
No. And all those things stand. So, but unfortunately, that's all I got for you, my man.
Well, I appreciate it. Anyways.
Yeah.
It was helpful. And it's hard to find good advice. You know what I mean? Again, living in South Carolina, I don't really know anyone who would have any kind of perspective on that who I could talk to besides like the rest of my family, because we all obviously know my sister.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
What I recommend is check out the link to the Discord in the description for this video.
Yeah.
Because the Discord has a really diverse, really cool group of people who would also probably be up for talking to. And, finding community and people to talk to is fucking important.
Yeah.
You can't be an island, Brendan. You need people, man.
I've been doing it this far. Come on.
Yeah, well, it's not going to last forever. Don't burn out.
No, I get it. I appreciate that. And I will probably go ahead and join the Discord. That's something I've been thinking about anyway.
Sounds good. But neither me nor the Discord are a
therapist.
You knew exactly where I was going.
Yep.
All right. Take care, brother.
Thank you. You have a good Sunday.
You too. This has been a weird episode, but an interesting one. I'm really interested in finding out just how much I put my foot in my mouth, or where we go. But I will tell you this. I have a Christian apologist coming on next week. So get ready. Save your questions. Figure out what you're going to call in with, because you're going to get access to him. And I'm very, very ready for that. I want to hop into the Discord. I want to go say hi to people. I also want to read the super chats. So let me do that right now. We have My Unfinished Journey sent $6.66 and says, Hail Nero. I cannot pronounce that every time. Hail Nero, hail Eric, and hail choosing skepticism. Thank you, My Unfinished Journey. Tierson sent $5 and says, thanks for taking my call. Cheers for all the kiddies out there. That's very sweet. Sean Isherwood sent £5 and says, every topological space defines a topos. I found this out recently, given that topological spaces are everywhere, so are topoi. Topoi. Oh, that's going to bug me. I had to share this. I have no idea that's going to be another rabbit hole, but thank you, Sean. And then 4C Riley sent £1. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it, you guys. If anybody wants to support the show, other than super chats, go to patreon.com/skepticgeneration. Every little bit helps. I'm going to go over to the Discord and hang out with people and decompress. It's been a hell of a day. You guys, there is hope. There is hope. I'm currently working on, finished up a video for my buddy Drew, Genetically Modified Skeptic. And it's about hope in these times. When it comes out, you should check it out. But be good to yourself. Be good to others. Yeah, I think that's about it. I'm Eric Murphy. I'm glad we had this talk.